Hi there. Thanks for being here with me today. I'm working on a fun birthday layout using the Friends of the Ocean collection from Stampin' Up. It's definitely not your typical birthday paper, but I love using themed collections in unexpected ways. And this one just felt like the perfect fit for the photos I'm scrapbooking. I'm creating a double page layout, and these are the pictures I am documenting today. They are from my youngest son, Evan's 10th birthday. He had one request, a lobster supper. So what better paper to use than one covered in lobsters and crabs? I've already created a few layouts with this collection, so today I'm focusing on using up more of my scraps. I still have a plan for future layouts with this collection, so I'm trying to spread it out. The DSP, along with the coordinating stamp and dies, is currently in the last chance section and only available while supplies last. If you want to take a closer look, I'll have everything linked in the description box below. To get a bit of a head start on this layout, I created a frame using a retired polka dot DSP from Stampin' Up, along with Night of Navy and Willow white cardstock. I did remove the middle of the polka dot paper to save some of it for later, but I left the cardstock whole. Honestly, I probably could have gutted it too, but I just didn't feel like it at this time. I've pulled out two main pattern papers to work with. Since this is a birthday layout and not an ocean themed one, I eliminated everything too oceany or pink. I did consider using orange pattern paper, but aside from the lobster, which leans more coral, there wasn't much of it in the photos. So I let that guide my choices. I'm not sure if I want to use the Calypso Coral lined paper for each side of the layout with just a peek of the lobster pattern showing, or flip that idea and use the lobster print more predominantly with the coral paper layered over top. I also have a leftover square piece I thought would work nicely layered over one side. I'll lay out my photos to see what I like better. I'm working with 7 photos today, and these 2 will go in a flip-flap. 5 of them are printed 3x4, 1 is 4x4. This is my goofy husband having fun with his food. He always finds a way to make us laugh. I'll place my favorite photo, which is 4 by 5 3/4. That includes the white border here as my focal photo, with one more 3x4 photo beside that. I'm loosely aiming for a grid style arrangement, filling the square piece, but it won't be a perfect grid because of the photo sizes. And I'm totally okay with that. The variety actually gives me nice little pockets for embellishing. Right now, I'm leaning towards the lobster paper running down both sides of the layout. I think it brings something fun and unexpected to a birthday page. Okay, I'm going to trim everything down and I'll be right back with some measurements. I've cut the lobster paper to 5 by 12 for the right, and for the left I'm using a piece that's 3 by 12. From my square scrap, I cut off a 2-inch strip, which leaves me with an 8 by 8 3/4 square for the right side and a 2 by 8 3/4 piece for the left. Now let's bring my photos back in. I went through a strange phase where I was taking pictures on an angle. I have no idea why, but I'm glad it didn't last too long. I must have thought it was artsy or creative at the time, but now that I look back on them, they just look kind of silly. Did you ever do that? Like go through a phase with your pictures that seemed to be a good idea back when, but makes you laugh now? I brought in Night of Navy for the frame, but I'm also seeing a brighter blue pop in the photos. Both boys are wearing shirts that pick up on that tone. So for the focal photo, I trimmed a photo mat from Azure Afternoon cardstock. It's 4 1/4 by 6 inches. And for these 2 photos here, I'm using a double mat that measures 6 1/4 by 4 1/4. I like repeating colors and design elements across both sides of the layout. It really helps to keep it more cohesive. To help define the layers, I'm adding some ink around the edges using Night of Navy and a sponge. It's something I do to most of my layouts, and I really like that bit of definition it gives. It's subtle, but I think it makes a big difference. For the title and embellishments, I'm pulling in several stamp and die sets. From the Wildflower Celebration set, I'm using the word Celebrate for my title. Of course, I'm also using the Ocean Friends bundle, mostly just the lobster die. I've also got the birthday celebrations dies, which include a fun banner and numbers 1 through 9. I grabbed the Round We Go for some sentiment options like happy birthday and hip hip hooray. And then I pulled out an old favorite from my stash called Birthday Wishes, because I love the little cake and the Make-A-Wish sentiment. I have a few more birthday themed stamps in my stash I have pulled, and I may include them, but for now, I think I've got a good mix of stamps to start building with. I'm planning for the title to sit above the focal photo, so I'm just gently pulling it off the carrier sheet and laying it in place to get a feel for it. This set has great options for titles and subtitles, and they're a good size for scrapbook pages. I like how that looks. I'm just not sure what color to stamp yet. I think once I start building the rest of the layout, the right color will reveal itself. For now, I'm going to move this photo, the one going in the flip flap, off to the side. So off camera, I already mounted all the photos onto the Calypso Coral striped DSP, but I haven't attached that to the layout just yet. I have an idea for adding a little background interest first, and that's also why I haven't stamped the title yet. So I pulled out this mask from my stash, one I picked up a while ago in the discounted section from Stampin' Up. The herringbone pattern kind of reminds me of the logo on Evan's shirt, so I thought it would be fun to echo that behind the focal photo and the title, maybe even a bit behind the areas I plan on placing my embellishment clusters. I don't want to bring in any new colors, so to tie in with the orange on the patterned lobster paper, I'm going to use pumpkin pie. It's going to fill in that space nicely and add a bit of balance across the layout. I'm not planning to go overboard here, just concentrating most of the color in the middle near the photo and blending it outwards. This will create soft areas for the title and embellishments to sit. Okay, so right about here, that is going to work nicely. Normally, I'd blot my brush off first, but since I'm starting right behind the photo and fanning the ink up and out, I'm not worried about harsh blending spots. The area will be covered anyway with the photo. I don't want it to look like a perfect block, so I'm keeping it random, even bringing some color out to the side of the photo area, not just at the top. Let's see how that looks. I'm just going to add a touch more here to soften that edge. It is starting to look a bit like a square. Much better. I'll add a little bit more down here, peeking out from behind this photo. I really like using masks on layouts. I love that extra interest they bring, but they still keep the page feeling light since we're not adding more paper to weigh it down. If you haven't noticed, I tend to like a lot of white space on my layouts. I find that the brighter and more busy the paper I'm using, the more white space I like to leave. I think I'll add just a bit more up here. I wasn't planning to add an embellishment cluster in that area, but I like how it helps dress up that white space. I'm sure I can come up with something that feels intentional, like a stamped sentiment or a little accent, but I'll do that a little later. Yep, I like this. So I'm going to clean off my stencil off camera. To do this, I usually use just a baby wipe, quick and easy. I want to bring in a little more definition between the coral pattern and the lobster pattern paper. So I'm adding an extra mat of Night of Navy cardstock to each of the coral pattern pieces, just about 1/8 of an inch larger. I also trimmed a new piece from the left side. It's a little wider now, 3 inches instead of 2, and I like that better. It pulls in more of that pattern and helps balance everything out across the layout. While I'm working on that, I wanted to talk a bit about the colors I chose, especially the 2 blues I brought in. I'm using both Night of Navy and Azure Afternoon on this layout, and that is a very intentional choice. Night of Navy brings in a deep, rich tone that really grounds the layout and adds some nice contrast. Plus, it shows up on both boys' shirts, so it feels connected to the photos. And there's Azure Afternoon. It's bright and playful, and I picked it because that same blue shows up in the shirts they're wearing. I also love using the 2 blues together because of the color theory. Now, Night of Navy and Azure Afternoon sit opposite the warmer orange and corals on the color wheel, so they're complementary colors. That contrast really makes both color families pop and brings in that natural vibrancy to the layout. It helps draw your eye around the page and keeps things feeling light and festive, which is exactly the mood I want for a birthday themed layout. Now, you may recognize this page. I just pulled it out from the catalog that recently expired, and I like to keep it handy on my desk for reference. It also lists all the colors of the pattern papers, and I find that really handy to have close by. Since this is a birthday theme layout, I want to bring in some birthday embellishments. The birthday celebrations dies. I only purchased the dies, mainly for the banner element, but I've found the numbers to be super useful too. So here I use the dies to create a layered banner element to fill in this open area above the title on the left side of the layout in the upper right corner. I cut pieces from Night of Navy cardstock, Azure Afternoon, and some of the polka dot pattern paper I used in the frame. I'm just alternating the blue tones with the polka dot layer on top, and I really like how that looks. For the 3 embellishment clusters, I'll be placing one in the lower left corner to help fill in that space, one over here on the right of the layout, and I'm treating the banner as my 3rd cluster for this design. I wanted to add a lobster or 2 to the clusters. I'm using the Ocean Friends dies to cut out a few of the pink lobsters from the pattern paper. I could fussy cut them out, but I don't really trust my cutting skills around the antennae, and since I already have the dies, it's just easier. If you wanted a different color combination for these lobsters, you could use the coordinating stamps to make your own in any color you'd like, but I'm happy with the pink ones here. One has Melon, Mambo, and Pumpkin Pie tones, and the other is, again, Melon Mambo with Berry Burst. That's the one I'm placing here to start off this cluster. Now, to help the lobsters stand out, I'm placing a white cardstock circle I cut using the Spotlight and Nature dies. I love this one because to me it looks like a plate, which felt just right since we're documenting a lobster dinner. I knew if I started placing embellishments in this area, they'd look a little random, so I wanted to give them a solid anchoring point. To repeat the banner detail, I'm bringing in the nested essential dies. I cut one banner shape from the polka dot paper and the other from petal pink cardstock. Now, you're probably wondering why petaled pink? The lighter color in the lines on the coral pattern paper look petal pink to me. So I think this works perfectly without introducing a brand new color into the mix. Next, I'm using a stamp set from my stash to add a few birthday theme embellishments. I stamped the cake onto white cardstock using pumpkin pie, along with the sentiment Make a Wish, and a few candles. So for those I used Azure Afternoon, and for the sentiment I went with Melon Mambo to repeat the pink from the lobster. And I used a circle die from my stash to cut out the sentiment. I'm keeping the embellishments fairly simple on this layout, since the lobster pattern paper is really quite busy. Now, in addition to the lobster dinner, Evan had one more request: fake beer. A 10-year-old's dream, right? I was actually iced tea. So I'm creating a little fake beer glass embellishment. For this, I'm using the Cheers and Sips stamp set, and I'll walk you through how I made it. First, I stamped the tall glass onto white cardstock using basic gray ink, but I used second generation stamping. This means I stamped it once onto scrap paper, then again onto the cardstock without re-inking. And I let this dry for a few minutes. Then I brought in pumpkin pie with a blending brush. After tapping off on some scrap paper, I'll start blending the color from the middle of the glass, working up and down, avoiding the very bottom and top of the glass. I wanted most of the color concentrated in the middle. I could have used a smaller brush, but I liked how the larger brush gave it a softer gradient feel. To create the foam at the top, I used a smaller blending brush with white ink and blended just along the very top of the glass. For the line of the liquid inside, I used the coordinating stamp, stamped off twice with pumpkin pie, then lightly blended over it with the blending brush to soften the edges. Once that was done, I fussy cut the glass instead of using the die. I didn't want any of that extra ink showing around the edges, and cutting it out by hand let me get a little closer to the image for a cleaner look without that white border. Even though I only used orange and white ink, the way they blended together gave the glass some softer tones, almost like a hint of the petal pink. I love how this subtle shift helps repeat that pink I used elsewhere on the layout and ties everything together. And that's it. I'm going to use the one I made earlier though, because the white pigment ink can take a while to dry and I really don't want to smudge anything on the layout. I'll place it right here beside the lobster. I cut another circle from Night of Navy cardstock to tuck under the white plate circle. I just felt like it needed a little bit more layering. I wanted to help it pop a little bit more. Then I cut the number 10 from Azure Afternoon cardstock using the birthday celebration dies, repeating that blue in the cluster. The Make a Wish sentiment needed a little extra pop as well, so I cut another circle from black cardstock, just 1/8 of an inch wider to match that, and definitely did the trick. To repeat the black on the left side of the layout, I cut out a little knife and fork with my Cricut. I like adding just a little bit of black here and there on my layout to help ground things. So I was looking for something to bring Night of Navy into the cluster on the right. So I stamped a camera onto white cardstock using Night of Navy ink. This camera is from my stash. It was an old stamp set from close to my heart. Cameras are always great embellishments, especially when documenting big moments like birthdays or even travel themed layouts. At this point, I feel like I've done a good job repeating my colors across the layout and between my clusters. And by process of elimination, I know exactly the color to stamp my title: black. Now, I know if I try to stamp this on camera, my head is going to be right in the way and you're not going to see anything anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp this off camera. It turned out great, but I'll admit I cheated a little. I used my mini Misty. Since the layout is way too big for the mini, I had to get a little creative. I carefully placed the layout into the MISTI, lining it up so the door could reach the spot where I wanted the title to go. I used the top of the MISTI to help keep everything straight. Then I added the magnet to hold it in place. From there, I used it just like usual. Placed the stamp, closed the door to pick it up, inked it up, and stamped. Easy. Not something I would recommend doing all the time, but it worked great. I still have this open area here that I want to fill in with a word sentiment or another little element. So I'm going to tuck another lobster in behind the paper layers. I think it looks super fun, but now it needs some words. I'm using this new stamp called More Messages. This one is an online exclusive that just released at the beginning of May. It's a cling stamp. And what's really cool is that you can stamp the entire thing once, then cut out all the phrases with the coordinating dies in one pass. You end up with a bunch of ready-to-go sentiments for your layouts or cards. From that set, I'm adding happy birthday and I adore you to this layout. I'm looking for another sentiment to go with the peeking lobster, but I wasn't really finding anything that worked. So off camera, I stamped hip hip hooray from the round we go stamp set right onto the layout. And then I covered the hip hip part with the lobster. It works perfectly, like he's popping up to say hooray. I also typed up and printed my journaling onto white cardstock using a 3x4 text box in my word processor. So it would fit neatly inside the flip flap along with the extra photo. Now I'm really liking how this layout is coming together, but I feel like the title area needs some balloons. Because what's a birthday without balloons, right? I pulled out an older item from my stash, a balloon punch that cuts out 2 sizes of balloons and coordinates with the balloon celebration stamp set. Off camera, I stamped some details onto the balloons and punched out 3. One in pumpkin pie, one in melon mambo, and then petal pink for the last one. And I'll place them around the title, staggering the heights and overlapping a couple of them to add interest and make the whole section feel more connected. To create strings, I started by lightly sketching down lines from the balloons with a pencil, and then I'm going to go over them with a fine tip black journaling pen using a really light hand. And speaking of journaling pens, did you know that Stampin' Up! Is now carrying fine tipped journaling pens? They're in my next order and I can't wait to test them out. I'm so happy with how this layout turned out. It's playful and fun, and the lobster paper just ties everything together with the photos in such a unique way. I love that unexpected ocean theme on a birthday page. Sometimes those little twists make a layout extra special. I also think the color palette worked out really well. I didn't set out to build it around complementary colors, but the mix of warm oranges, corals, and pinks with the bold pop of blue really helps everything feel lively and balanced. To keep this video from getting too long, I did a few final touches off camera. I used my journaling pen to draw a sketchy line around the outer edge of the white cardstock. It gives the whole page just a bit of fun doodled look and fills in that white space while adding to the playful birthday vibe I was going for. Once I put this layout in my album, I'll attach the flip flap to the outside of the page protector. I added some holographic resin dots, just 3 in each cluster, but none in the title area. There's already quite a bit going on there, and I didn't want to take away from the design. If you enjoyed this process, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribed so we can keep scrapbooking together. I always enjoy hearing from you, so feel free to comment below. I've posted still photos over on my Instagram if you want a closer look. Thank you so much for watching. And here's a video to watch next. It's another layout I created using the same collection. If you enjoyed this one, I think you'll really enjoy it too. And until next time, happy crafting.